a greater pleasure or a greater honor to be the person to introduce you to Angress. Hans has been a loyal and wonderful supporter of not only the lecture series, but all of the efforts that we make through the Alliance to bring you Holocaust and Genocide education. Hans was born in Germany. His family, like many German Jewish families, fled to Holland. And it was in Holland that Hans became a hidden child. And he lived and he's going to tell you about it, for a period of time with the Dutch family that sheltered him and became almost like a second family to him. He has an important message for you, not only the story of his life and his experiences, and the beautiful story of the people who risked their lives to save his life, but also his perspective on what we should make of what he makes out of his experience. I know that you'll enjoy hearing him. Would you join me in welcoming Hans?
Thank you again, Dr. Goodman, for that kind introduction. The reason I like to share my experiences growing up during the Nazi period in Germany and in Holland is to share with you what it felt like growing up Jewish under Nazi rule, being considered a surplus human being, to be eliminated, and how my mother, my brother, and myself managed to survive. Another reason is that I promised my brother Tom on his deathbed 4 years ago that I would continue to work towards the goal of more peaceful world. And by sharing my experiences, I hope to promote tolerance towards those who are different from us in any way whatsoever. I will focus on my experience, on my own experiences, on that of my brother Tom, who was 8 years older than I was, and who experienced Germany for 13 years before Hitler came to power. And towards the end, I will spend a few minutes on Dr. Bruno Kitt, who was a doctor who selected my father to die in Auschwitz 10 days after he arrived there. So with this short introduction, I will share with you my own experiences. This is sort of, Mercy High made this picture. It is sort of a cast of characters. My father and mother are on top, and this is my brother Freddie, who is 5 years older to the day than I am, and this is my brother Tom, who was 8 years older and who had a completely different experience. And this is a couple that sheltered me for a year and a half in Holland. Much later, and when they had come to the United States, this was taken in the South Bay. Hitler himself really doesn't bother me that much. I mean, he was a narcissist if there ever was one. He really felt that the Aryans, the blue-eyed, blonde, tall people under his sole guidance should rule the world, and that all others should be either subjugated or eliminated. I mean, he was a nutcase. What is more scary is how many Germans became enthusiastic followers of him. And to my mind, how easy it is, shows how easy it was for the Nazis to pull the whole nation along. And here I will start sharing with you what my experiences was. This was a year after Hitler came to power. I started school. I was 6 years old, and the cone I'm carrying there is filled with goodies, and it means to show that hopefully the next year will be a sweet year. Well, it didn't quite turn out that way. I was in a class of 52 boys. I was the only Jewish kid, and the teacher placed me in the rear, a little bit separate from the other kids, as if I had a contagious disease. Now, the kids were not nasty to me. They never called me dirty Jew or spit in my face or did any of that sort. They simply didn't associate with me. What I do believe is what happened, even so it was only 1 year after Hitler came to power, that the German population already has absorbed the fact that the Nazi government expected the German population as a matter of fact to hate the Jews. And so the parents, most likely most of them were not Nazis, but they simply probably told their kids, leave that Angress kid alone. So it was a lonely existence. And for instance, in the morning when the school started, we assembled around the flagpole and they hoisted the German flag, black, white, and red, and sang the German national anthem, and then they hoisted the swastika and sang the Horst Wessel song. And they all stood at attention with a Nazi salute, and I was supposed not to sing and stand with my arms beside my body. Now, I didn't want to sing and I didn't want to give the Nazi salute, but I certainly stood out like a sore thumb. We moved to a different area, and my parents decided to put me into a Jewish school. And that made things life much easier for me. And the school was called the Joseph Lehmann Schule, Joseph Lehmann School. And it was 1936, and Berlin had Olympics. And the Jewish schools decided to have their own mini Olympics. And my brother Fred participated in the, I think it was 100-meter dash and high jump. And I was too young to participate, but I was selected to carry this school sign. Keep this picture in mind, it will come back later on. Well, I must have skipped something. We lived in, when we moved, we lived in a western section of Berlin toward the suburbs. And on Sunday mornings, my brother Fred and I liked to sit in front of the window and watch what was going on down below the street. There was a lot of traffic, and my parents were still sleeping on Sunday morning. And besides the traffic, the brown shirts came walking, marching down the street, singing, wenn das Judenblut vom Messer spritzt, dann geht's noch mal so gut. When the Jewish blood squirts off the knife, things go twice as well. Well, you can imagine that this ditty didn't particularly sit well with me, and I went to my parents and asked, what does that mean? And they told me, well, that's their problem, don't worry about it. Well, it turned out to be my problem. We led a fairly normal life in Berlin, even though lots of edicts, I mean, Jews were not allowed to be public servants anymore, they wouldn't be allowed to be teachers other than to Jewish kids and so forth. But by and large, we didn't have to wear the star yet, and actually lived a fairly normal life, even though you knew you were hated. When you went to school, you saw the cartoons all over the place of Jew drinking Christian blood for Easter, and you know, you knew that that was meant to be you. Anyhow, in 1937, my father read the newspaper and concluded that it was impossible for him to remain in Germany, and decided we had to leave. I'll back up for a minute. Because I want to fill you in on my brother's Tom experiences. He was, like I told you, 8 years older than I was, and stayed in school until 1936. At that time, he was, my father insisted that he enroll in an agricultural school. It was obvious that Jewish kids didn't have a chance in Germany, and that Jews had to find, to make a living somewhere else in the world, and in agriculture is universal. So Tom stayed in school until 1936, and then he also joined a youth organization called Das Schwarze Fähnlein, loosely translated the Black Platoon, which was a Jewish response to the Hitler Youth. And these Jewish kids felt very German, and felt that Germany was their fatherland and would remain their fatherland. And they naively firmly believed that all they had to do was to prove to the new German Nazi government that in all their being, their thinking and their actions, they were German and would remain German. In response, they expected to be accepted into the broad front of German renewal. Well, that didn't happen. I never did have any positive feeling about Germany, but I just wanted to point out how the 8 years difference, how much difference it made. And I always kidded my brother. I told him, you know, if you wouldn't have been Jewish, you would have been a Nazi. And he didn't like it. Tom, let me see what we left Germany in 1937, and from Berlin went through Holland, boarded the boat to England, and then went on to London. We had only a visitor's visa for London, so we couldn't stay for England, so we couldn't stay there. We tried to get across the ocean, but it all would have taken way too long. And finally, my parents made the fateful decision to go back to Holland and settle in Amsterdam. And there had the only 2 normal years of my life, really, of my childhood. I first went to school where I was supposed to learn Dutch. Well, here were about 50 or 60 German Jewish kids who were supposed to learn Dutch, and the teacher certainly tried, but among ourselves, we kept on jabbing in German. And I felt I wasn't making enough of a headway, and told my father, put me into a Dutch school and let me sink or swim. And he finally agreed to do that, and it was rough for a while. I was running around with a dictionary under my arm, but I managed. And this picture is from the outing that our class did, the Dutch school that I enrolled in. And this is me holding the goat, and this is my girlfriend of the time, Hedda. And the guy blew up Mercy High blew up the picture. I went too fast. And this is the 2 of us in 1993 when my wife and Enola visited her. And in Holland, I also joined the Boy Scouts and first the Club Scouts and the Boy Scouts. And really had a wonderful time. My brother Tom, in the meantime, managed in 1939 to get to the United States because of his agricultural training. That made it possible for him to get here and not to the United States and not for us. He worked on a farm for a while, and when the war broke out, he joined the army, was trained at Camp Ritchie to be an interrogator of prisoners of war, because he, of course, was fluent in German. He was one of the Ritchie boys. And a few days before, he was shipped over to England, and a few days before D-Day, the 82nd Airborne Division asked for more interrogators, so he joined the 82nd a week or 10 days before D-Day, and his first jump was into Normandy. He was dropped behind the lines, was captured, and fortunately they never found out that he was a German Jew, and also fortunately he got liberated again a few days later and took part in the Battle of the Bulge, and later on also helped liberate a concentration camp. The Nazis invaded Holland in 1940, in May 1940. And the first year they sort of behaved themselves because they thought that the Dutch, whom they also considered Aryans, would join them in their conquest to conquer the world. Well, that didn't happen. The Dutch didn't like to be occupied by the Nazis, and I think to this day they are not particularly fond of the Germans. And so after a year or so, the Germans became nasty in Holland, especially against the Jews. My father was arrested in 1941 because when we left Germany, he took his hard-earned money along, and that was forbidden. Jews were actually encouraged to leave the country, but in order to do that, they were required to leave most of their belongings and capital behind. And my father felt that he had a responsibility for a family of 5, and he wasn't about to leave his money behind. And so he paid a young lady probably 10% of whatever she smuggled out of the country. She had a suitcase with a double bottom, and hauled that money to Holland, where it safely arrived. But, that, according to German law, made him a criminal, and so he was arrested in 1941. And as long as he was in prison, he was sentenced to a year in prison. As long as he was in prison, we could exchange letters, but when his term was up, he was sent to several concentration camps, ended up in Auschwitz, where he was killed 10 days later. I just want to mention that Auschwitz was not necessarily only in, even though more people died in Auschwitz than in any other concentration camp, it was not solely an extermination camp, but also employed many people in that camp. So it was slave labor camp also. So I know that my father wasn't, when he arrived in Auschwitz, was not herded straight in the gas chamber, or he wouldn't have died 10 days later. In 1941 also, the Jews in Holland had to start wearing this gem. And you had to wear that any time you were outside of your own house. And not only on your outer garments, but also on your, like I wear it right now, on your regular sweaters. Anytime you were anywhere outside the house, that star had to be visible. And anybody over 6 years of age had to carry an ID. And all Jews had a J stamped into their ID. And if you ever were stopped by the Nazis and had a J in your ID and no star, basically you were toast. Well, this is my brother Tom again. I told you about him. This is my father. And in Holland, I had finished elementary school, which is in Holland 6 years. And then you go to a high school. Now, high school in Holland, at that time at least, it was different than here. You don't go to high school and pick your classes. You pick a direction you want to go in, and you stay with those students all the way through. So there are programs varying from 2 years to 7 years. And I had taken an exam for high school mainly geared towards math and science. Taken an exam on a Friday the 13th. I felt not everybody could fail. And I did pass, but when the time came, the edict came down that Jews were not allowed to go to regular schools anymore, had to go to Jewish school. And since Hedda was half Jewish and didn't have to wear the star and could continue to go to the school, I decided to switch from the math to the more language and what do you call it? Liberal arts, yes, thank you. Which was a big mistake, but nevertheless. And so that was another thing that happened in 1941, that we started going to Jewish school. One of my fellow students was Anne Frank. She was not in my class, she was on a different track, but the school itself had 2 tracks, the lycée track, which was 7 years, and the gymnasium track, which was 6 years. And I was on the gymnasium track and she was on the lycée track. So even though our classes were adjacent, I think, if I remember correctly, this was my class and this was Anne's class. The only real contact I had with her is when we had intramural volleyball games. And if I remember correctly, she was not the greatest volleyball player, but then she was a brainiac, what can I say? There was a book written about our school called Absent. And, well, this is a picture of Anne, whom I did not know terribly well. But going to the school was really our only escape. At that time, Jews were not allowed to do anything recreational anymore. No swimming, no movie, no theater, no whatever. So school was really our escape. Initially, we were still allowed to bicycle to school, but then they took our bicycles away also. We had to hand them over to the Nazis, and I refused to do that. I gave them to a friend of mine. They were not about to get my bike. It was not registered, so nobody could find me guilty of that. We were also not allowed to use public transportation any longer. And I lived about 2.5 miles from the school, so I had to walk 2.5 miles back and forth each day, which during nice days was not a problem. During rainy days, it was a bit uncomfortable. Let me see what's next. The book that was written about the school, they had the class lists was saved somehow. And the only reason why I print this is to show you that we actually did share the school. here's my name, the first year in the gymnasium class and the second year gymnasium class. And here is Anne Frank's name, the first year of the lycée class. And she never made it to the second year because her family went into hiding. In 1941, also, Hitler decided the final solution of the Jewish problem. Until that time, the Jews were encouraged to leave the country. Now, that was mainly in Germany before the war. So that's how half the German population got saved. They were able to move out of the country because it was obvious that they couldn't stay in there. But after the war broke out, it was, people could not move around, could not cross borders anymore. So the Germans were stuck with the Jews in Germany as well in the countries that they occupied. And so Hitler ordered the final solution of the Jewish problem. As a consequences in, I think it was January 1942, the infamous conference at the Wannsee conference took place in the Wannsee Villa, where these 12 guys, most of them having PhDs and otherwise were high military guys, I compare them sort of to the board of directors of Clark Pest Control, except that their job was not to eradicate termites, but to eradicate 11 million Jews living in Europe. It took them 90 minutes to figure out how to do that. They came up with the idea of the gas chamber. And after that, they went for lunch. Years later, in 1993, when Inola and I visited the house in the Wannsee where the conference took place, I found all of a sudden that picture of me blown up. It was part of an exhibition of what Jewish life in Berlin was like. And well, they didn't know who I was, and I certainly didn't know that that picture was there. So when I came into that place and saw that picture, it blew my mind. In June of 1942, the real eradication of the Dutch Jews started. It started with a order to report which 2,000 German Jewish kids in Holland who lived in Holland received. And there was a long list of stuff that they were to bring along and what they were supposed to, where they were supposed to report to. And 800 of them reported as ordered. My brother got a call, so did the older sister of Anne Frank, and that's why the Frank family went into hiding. Mr. Frank had made prepared for that. He knew that the time would come. And we had two young German refugee girls living with us. They were 18 and 19 years old. One was already an accomplished pianist. And they were adults. I mean, my mother advised them not to go. But they said, oh, it won't be so bad. And they took along tennis rackets and sunglasses. They expected to be able to do recreational stuff after work. And well, I'll come back to that later. My brother also got the call, my brother Fred. And my mother said, you're not going, period. And she managed to get a job for him with the Jewish Council, the Yotzerat. And it was one of the jobs that he had initially was to go along with the SS at night to round up his fellow Jews for transport. The Nazis wanted Jews along for two reasons. One, if people were too old to carry things, or mothers had more than one kid and had to carry a baby, then there was somebody to help. And also to have a friendly face along so that people wouldn't panic. And quite frankly, panic was the only thing that might have helped. Later on, initially, after the deportation started, they managed to deport 100,000 Jews in a period of about a little over a year. So quite a few each week. And first they just picked them up and put them on the train to a concentration camp. But rather than picking up every day a few, they decided to collect them for a week and hold them in a converted theater in Amsterdam, a Jewish theater. And my brother worked there too. And the Yotzerat kids did basically all the administration and tried to look after help people in the theater there as much as they could. Another boy from the Jewish Council, Walter Wüsken, decided he was going to try to get as many kids out as he possibly could, as many people out. And the babies were not in the theater itself, they were across the street in a nursery, because they were deemed to be too disturbing, too much of a disturbance in that one big hall where up to 2,000 people were housed. And so the 5 kids, I mean, Walter Wüsken chose 5 of his Jewish council members to help him with his quest to save people. My brother was one of them. And so what they did is they found out who the baby was across the street, went to the parents in the theater and asked them, are you willing to give up your kid so that he doesn't get shipped off to wherever you're going to be shipped off to? And you can imagine what kind of a decision that was going for those parents. Were they going to abandon their child in order to try to save it? And quite frankly, we don't know exactly, nobody kept track of that. But the figures that are being bandied around are between 600 and 1,000 babies got saved that way. One way they could do that is, of course, the Nazis knew how many people they had picked up, so when the time came to ship them out, the count had to be correct. So the mothers who had given up their children were taught how to bundle up, hold a bundle in their arm that looked like a baby in there, but there wasn't. And also the counts was done by the Jewish Council. And when they knew that about 10 people were shipped out, the guy that was doing the counting went 78, 79, 90, 91, 92, just skipped 10, and they were never caught at it. As a matter of fact, it's amazing with how much stuff one could get by, because Jews were deemed to be cowards and were not suspected to do this sort of thing. So probably about 600 children and 600 adults. That's the minimum amount, and the numbers that are again bandied around is up to 2,000, but I don't really know, and nobody else does. Of the 800 kids, so my brother started working for the Jewish Council. Hey, Mom. Like I say, she got my brother to the enrolled in the Yotzerat, and that gave us a stamp that until further notice you are exempt from work in Germany. Of course, the most important words in there is until further notice. You knew that there would come an end to that too, but it bought you time. Like I said, in the Jewish IDs, they had to be stamped with a J, and everybody had to carry one of these things. I lost a gem. The 800 people that responded, 5 months later in November they were picked up, and they responded in June. In November there came death notices for each and every one of them. Now these were young, healthy people between the ages of 18 and about 30. And, you know, there was no possible reason that 800 out of 800 died in 4 months. So that should have been a wake-up call. My mother read the Nazis correctly. She was a survivor and did everything to save herself and the 2 boys she was responsible for. Unfortunately, she was the exception. Her advice to us boys was, if the Nazis ever get a hold of you, run. The worst that can happen to you is that they shoot you. And believe me, that is a lot better than what you're going to find at the end of the train ride they want to put you on. And how right she was. When the deportation started, I went back for the 2nd year, and every morning when you came to class, you looked around who was still there and who was not there. I mean, my class was 23 students, and 1 year later there were 3 of us left. So whenever you came to class, you looked around, and if somebody had disappeared on the day that there was a raid, a razzia as it was called, the night before, you could reasonably assume that the SS had picked them up and shipped them off. When a kid disappeared, when there was nothing going on, then there was a good chance that that family had gone into hiding. Now, of my class of 23, actually 12 survived. That's better than 50%, which is double the average of the Dutch Jewish population as a whole. Only 25% survived. So, I mean, going to school was on the way a normal thing to do, but not only students kept on disappearing, but also teachers. My French teacher lasted only for about 3 weeks. I remember one morning when my history teacher, Dr. Presser, came to school and was terribly upset. His wife had been picked up the night before, and he tried to teach. And we students told him, man, go home and mourn you're in no shape to teach, which he did. By the way, he wrote the definitive book on the Dutch Jewish history during the war, and I can't remember the name of it right now, but he was actually the best teacher I ever had. At this point, I think I want to share with you some of the close escapes that my family went through. This is the home where I lived in, where our family lived in, and the street was called the Clio Street. And one day the Nazis decided to have the razzia of the Clio Street. Normally they had lists of people that they would pick up. But they thought maybe we can go from house to house and see whether we could find some Jews to pick up and deport. And so my mother and I was home, Fred was at work at the Jewish Council, and I was standing behind the curtain. We had heavier curtains than they are here in 1993. And I could see out, but it was practically impossible to look in. So I was watching what was going on behind the curtains, and I saw the SS men. We were living in the middle of the block, so I saw them coming closer and closer. And finally the SS men were standing there where I'm standing here in this picture, and rang the doorbell. And I was standing behind the window here. And it was like staring death into its face. I knew what he wanted. And I remembered my mother run. And my mother was home with a friend, and the friend was rather heavy-set and knew he couldn't run. But I grabbed my mother and I didn't know what she would do. But fortunately, she came along with me. And we went out the back door, jumped over this little wall, went across a little wall and into the apartment of friends or acquaintances, basically, across the street. And we were not inside for more than 30 seconds. Then the SS men who rang our doorbell appeared on our neighbor's back porch and went into our apartment. 30 seconds later, if I would have hesitated 30 seconds, or my mother wouldn't have come along, I wouldn't be here today. I decided I didn't feel safe, even that close, and went across the street to a boarding house where we knew the owners. And later on, my mother asked me, why didn't you come along? I said, you know, I dragged you out the first time. I wasn't going to drag you out the second time. And as it turned out, and nobody bothered her there. She was safe. Another time, my brother, since he was working closely with the SS, knew usually what was going on. And he was, how many of them came to report for work in the mornings? So if there were a whole bunch of SS men came, he knew there was something cooking. And one day he said, you know, there's something big going on and you better get out of the house. And he said, why don't you come to my office, because they probably won't bother that. So my mother and I went to the office of the Jewish Council, which was basically a regular apartment building which was converted into an office. And there were quite a few other people looking shelter in that building. And then, as it turned out, the SS men did come and check. And now what? So my brother had a couple of his buddies take me upstairs into the attic room and there was a trapdoor in the ceiling to the attic, and they put a chair on a table, and I climbed on the chair, and opened the trapdoor, and up in the attic I went, and closed the trapdoor, and they took the chair and the table away, and there I was, sweating it out. I had no idea what was going down below. My mother and brother I knew were down below, and so was the SS. Not a good combination. I got the scare of my life when the trapdoor opened. Fortunately, it was only another kid that they sent up. And while I was up there, nature called. And I was sort of balancing. There was no floor in the attic. There was just the beams and the glass and plaster ceiling below me. And I didn't really want to lose my life because of the yellow stain in the ceiling. And hey, there was an empty wine bottle. I've never been as happy with an empty wine bottle as then. Might be still up there, vintage 43. Anyhow, as you can imagine, I was sweating it out up there. I had no idea what to find when I came down from there. What was I going to do if my mother and brother had disappeared? I knew they would be taken to. Should I join them? I knew if I did that my mother would be furious. And so all this went through my mind. And when they finally picked me up, let me out from the attic, I found out that my mother and brother were still there. Now, the way they played it, the SS knew that there were people in there that didn't belong in there. So they took everybody in the building and put them in a large room. Then they got the list of the people that were working there. And they called the names off. If your name was called, you went over to the other side of the room. My brother Fred, in the meantime, he wore a white armband identifying him as one of the Jewish council, and he managed to slip out of the room. And so when the name Angress was called, my mother slipped across. I mean, you had to really be fast on your feet, and they had no way of communicating verbally. So you had to have your wits together, and that's how we survived that one. There was another time that we heard that there was something going on, and my brother was at work, and my mother and I went to some German lady. I have no idea who she was, who put us into a bedroom, gave us a potty and a bottle of water and told us we had to be absolutely quiet because her boyfriend was coming that night and he was a Nazi. And this was not the first time that happened, not the only time that happened. Anyhow, we survived that night, and I have no idea whether they actually came after us or not. In September of 1943, until further notice came to an end. By that time, there were only about less than 1,000 Jews left in Holland. Out of the 140,000, they either were in hiding, they had left the country, or they were transported. 105,000 Jews were actually transported to the camps, 5,000 of which survived the camps. 28,000 went into hiding, 16,000 survived. So you had a 5% chance of survival if you didn't go into hiding, and you had a better than 50% chance of survival if you did go into hiding. And what I blame the Jewish Council for, that they counseled you all along that it is better to obey than to defy. So when my brother came home and said, well, you know, tonight they're going to round up the rest of us, the few of us that are left, And my mother had prepared for that. I was not aware of any. By the way, the only thing that I actively did during that whole period was the day that I grabbed my mother and we went out the back door. It saved the life of my mother and me. But all the other times, the decisions all through the war were made for me, not by me. So when my brother came home and said, well, tonight it's going to be all over, my mother ordered a taxi. Now that in itself was there was no fuel in Amsterdam. There was maybe 1 or 2 taxis. How she managed to get a taxi is beyond me, but she did. And we grabbed an extra pair of clothes and some toiletries, and that was all we took along. We took off this jam, and the taxi took us to a German lady who lived right near where we used to live in Amsterdam, walking distance basically. And she was running a sweatshop where there was a room full of sewing machines where women made gloves and caps out of fur for the German soldiers on the Russian front. And it was after hours, so these people were gone. And again, this was again a German woman. Probably my father must have known her somewhere. How my mother got that contact, I don't know. Again, we were locked into that room and again given a potty and a bottle of water. And again we are told that we had to be absolutely quiet because that lady also had a Nazi boyfriend. Now here was a German woman hiding 3 Jews with a Nazi boyfriend. It was only one night, but a pretty absurd situation. The next morning, we had to leave early and we left into different directions. The Dutch resistance movement had sort of taken hold of us. They didn't have an immediate address for me, and so I went to a again German woman, and this one I knew. She was working with my father in Germany and later on also in Holland, a Miss Driller. And she lived in a boarding house which was run by 2 sisters, very religious. And I felt very safe there basically. But Miss Driller lived in a studio apartment and I was 15 years old. And it was really not a good place for me to be into hiding, but they said they were looking for a place for me. And so after 2 weeks, I was told they had found somebody. And again, the ironic thing is that the person that arranged a lot of this was a neighbor of ours in Amsterdam, Mr. Nolte, whom I barely knew, but who was connected to the Dutch resistance movement and pulled all those strings for us. And I ended up in hiding in this apartment for a year and a half. Now, as you can see, there were 8 families living on the staircase. They were told that I was a refugee from Rotterdam, and that the cause that my parents got killed when the Germans bombed Rotterdam, and many people in hiding had Rotterdam addresses because when the Germans bombed Rotterdam, they destroyed all the records. They hit the city hall. And so it wasn't impossible to trace. And they took my ID, and the Dutch resistance movement had real artists. They took the J out. They changed my name from Angress to Andreas, so they only had to change 2 letters there. But then they changed the birthplace from Berlin to Rotterdam. And so I had my original ID with a new ID. And to make sure that I knew who I was, often the family where I was in hiding woke me up in the middle of the night and said, "What's your name?" And I better answer Hans Andreas. They wanted to make sure that I knew what my new identity was. And those, obviously the boys had shared one bedroom and the parents had the other bedroom. But the boys' bedroom was long and narrow, so there was only room for 2 single persons' bed. And so those 2 boys had to sleep for a year and a half toe to toe in one bed, and I had the other bed. So it was not only for them, but I mean for those boys also a tremendous sacrifice to shelter me. While I was in hiding, the worst for me was over. I mean, between June 42 and September 43, I felt hunted all the time. Once I was in hiding, I knew the Nazis didn't know anymore where I was. And on top of that, the Cui family, Ali and Ton, and their entire family were heavily involved in the resistance movement. And so there was lots of activity, and actually for a 15-year-old kid that was pretty exciting. For instance, the people in hiding, there were not only Jewish people in hiding, but also many Dutch young people, because the Germans needed labor in Germany. All the Germans, young Germans, were soldiers. And so many Dutch young people, actually many more Dutch young people were in hiding than there were Jews in hiding. And all of them had to be supplied with food coupons, because without food coupons you had to buy your food for the people in hiding on the black market. And just to give you an idea what that would have cost, a pound of butter would have been approximately the equivalent of $60. And so that the same applies for bread and sugar and milk and whatsoever. Everything was rationed except fresh fruit and vegetables. So they had to get thousands and thousands of coupons every month to be distributed to people in hiding. And in Holland, weapons were not very common among people, and the Germans wouldn't allow the Dutch population to have weapons anyhow, but the Dutch resistance had some. But in order to raid a distribution center of coupons, to get the thousands of coupon sheets they need every month, you needed a weapon, and they couldn't raid the same place over and over again, so they had to go to distribution centers all over the country to hit them, because they were defended. And the father of Mrs. Cui decided if a weapon had to be hauled from one place to another, that he would do it. He said, I've lived my life, and if something goes wrong, let it be me who is in the 70s rather than you young guys. And one day he was on the train with a satchel and a pistol and ammunition in there, and the Nazis came through the train to check his luggage, or everybody's luggage. They were not really expecting to find guns and ammunition. What they were looking for was butter and eggs and cheese, which people tried to buy illegally from the farmers directly, which was forbidden. You were only allowed to buy your food with coupons from the stores. So they were trying to get a hold of the, what they called clandestine food. And so they came to Grandpa Larroux and said, well, Grandpa, what do we have here in that satchel? And he looks up at them with his, he was a very sweet-looking, short, old man with baby blue eyes. And he looked up at them and he said, guns and ammunition. And they just looked at them, and you know, the Nazis, the last thing they wanted to be is laughed at by the people around them. So they said, oh, you joker, and went on. So he was, of course, trained to do that. It was sort of psychological warfare. In the apartment, I can't go back, where I lived, they made a hiding place for me underneath the dining room table. There was a carpet that you could fold back, and they made cut out a little trapdoor and put a board down so that I could slide under and be trained. I mean, somebody could possibly betray me. I mean, there were 8 people living on that staircase, and my assumption is that they all knew that I was a Jew and hiding up there, and didn't believe the story of the Rotterdam orphan. But, you know, fortunately, they didn't betray me. You know, during that period, one thing, besides everything else, you needed luck, and a lot of it. And for me, luck held. And for the Frank family, it ran out. They did all the right things, and somebody betrayed them. Somebody easily could have betrayed me. I mean, there were at least 100 people that I knew that I was hiding there. So, anyhow, there was always a chance that an SS man or a Dutch policeman would ring the doorbell and that I would have to disappear. And since it was 4 flights, there was no elevator, they had to come up the flight. There was quite a bit of time for me to disappear. So one day we did a practice run, and somebody rang the bell down below and looked out the window, and it was an SS man, so-called. And so then I started getting into my hole there, and easily made it before that person who was acting as an SS man rang the doorbell upstairs. And so they also wanted to see how long I could last in there, because they didn't know whether there was enough air in there for me to last for any length of time. Well, you know, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and I was fine as far as air was concerned, but I was bored, and I found a knob, something, and I started twirling it. I didn't think anything of it. And the next day, the lady from downstairs came up to ring the doorbell for Mrs. Cooey, and she said, Mrs. Cooey, last night the strangest thing that happened to me. I was sitting in the living room listening to the radio, and all of a sudden my hanging plant started twirling and twirling and twirling. So the message was, better be careful. So I had the bolt for thank you, of a hanging plant. Towards the end of the war, they allowed me also to help distributing food coupons. I mean, once a month we got stacks and stacks of coupons who then had to be distributed. The Dutch underground was not one large organization. There were the Catholics and the Protestants and the communists and the socialists and you name it. And each one had their own group. but with the common enemy they worked together. That all started falling apart about 3 months before the end of the war, when they all started jockeying for position, for power after the war. But during the war, when there was a common enemy, they worked together. And so the food distribution and coupon distribution cross-pollinated all over the place. And during the end, I was allowed to haul some stuff, sometimes actual food. Once I bought a whole wheel of cheese, which was like gold, again to be distributed to people in hiding. And when I came back home, fortunately with an empty bag, I ran into the Cub Scout leader, my former Cub Scout leader, whom I knew had turned Nazi. And so now what? And so I decided to take the bull by the horn and went up to her and say, "Hi, Bajira." The Cub Scouts in Holland are based on the Rudyard Kipling's Jungle Book. And so the leader was Akela, the gray wolf, Bajira, the black panther, and Baloo, the bear. And so I ran into Bajira and said, "Hey, I guess you realize that I'm in hiding." She certainly knew that I was a Jewish refugee. And she said, "Don't worry, I won't betray you." And we chatted for a minute, and then she went one way and I went the other. But I made darn sure that I didn't go straight home and that I wasn't being followed. In Holland, the war came, in northern part of Holland, the war came to an end. The Germans were still there. The Allied were not in sight. And the war was over. I mean, it was a strange situation. All of a sudden, I could walk around and not be scared of the Germans anymore, even though they were still running around with their guns. And after a few days, I heard that the Canadians were going to arrive in the city to take over the administration until the Dutch could get their act together to govern their own country again. And I wanted to see that coming in. I wanted that as closure. So for some reason, the Kuis couldn't come along with me, and so I went by myself to the street where they were supposed to arrive. And there were thousands of people, of course, waiting. And finally I saw something coming from a distance, and leading the parade was a tall, good-looking black dude on a Harley Davidson with the biggest smile on his face that you can imagine. And to this day, this is still my symbol of freedom, this dude on his Harley. Then I knew the war was over. This picture I just put in there, it was amazing to have 1,000 planes. Amsterdam was on the fly past to Berlin from England. And so at times there came 1,000 American planes. The Americans flew in daytime, the Brits at night. Of course, the Brits you only heard, the Americans you actually saw. It's amazing, they came in waves of 100. But 100 planes, then a pause, and then another 100. And Anne Frank in her book said she was terribly scared of those planes up there. For me, it was music. And I hoped and that they would have a safe return. My mother, in the meantime, was in hiding in the boarding house where we lived when we first arrived in Holland. And she lived in one of those upstairs rooms, I don't know which ones. And the boarding house was taken over by German military officers. And she went by her maiden name, Henny Kiefer, and made their beds and cleaned their rooms and probably flirted with them. And had her hair done once a week and her fingernails. I mean, acted as normal as she possibly could. And my mother had her priorities anyhow. And that's how she survived. And again, it was an issue that Nazis never thought of, that a Jewish person would have the guts to do that. I'll skip that one. On Mother's Day, 1945, Brother Tom arrived. His commanding general had given him a jeep, together with also another soldier who had family in Amsterdam, and said, okay, go look for your family. Here, we have not been in touch since 1940, so we didn't know what he was up to, and he didn't know what we were up to. We had left a message at the last place where we lived that he knew that somebody might show up. I mean, either my father or my brother, oldest brother. And so we were reunited at that place. He was probably the first American soldier made it to Amsterdam. My father, as you know, did not survive. And I found out only actually last year. My oldest brother Tom in the United States became a history professor and taught at Berkeley and later on in Stony Brook, New York. And he managed to get a hold of the death certificate of my father. And those people that were not herded into the gas chamber actually got death certificates. And the death certificate said, died of certain heart stoppage. And I always found that that was also the language that I got in 1997 from the Red Cross, and I never quite knew what to do with that name, with that term. I mean, heart attack I know, but certain heart stoppage. And when I saw the German document that my brother got a hold of, it also said plötzlicher Herztod, which is the same thing. And it was signed by Dr. Kidd. So last year I Googled Dr. Kidd and found out that his job, one of his jobs in Auschwitz, was to select the people who were not deemed fit for work anymore, whom they didn't need anymore, and who then he selected to die. And there were orderlies, which were usually Jewish people, who brought these people who were selected to the office of the doctor. And then there was an orderly, another orderly, and I know the names of them, but it doesn't matter, who injected my father's heart with phenol, which causes death within 15 seconds. So in a way, I am grateful that my father didn't have to gasp for air for 15 minutes in the gas chamber. And he may not have even known what was happening to them, because what they do, the way they did it is that they have the victims cover their eyes and raise their arms, and then they orally inject the phenol. Dr. Kidd is an example of how good people can be made to do terrible things. He was raised a Catholic, had a practice in a small mining town in Germany before the war, and was well liked. He was married in 1944 by a priest of the Catholic Church to a Catholic woman while still in Auschwitz. And he had a son a year later who was baptized, which was highly unusual in Germany and was frowned by the Nazis. After Auschwitz was evacuated in January 1945 because the Russians were approaching, he became a camp doctor at the concentration camp Neuengamme near Hamburg, where he committed enough atrocities during the last 2 months of the war that the British tribunal, after a lengthy trial, sentenced him to death on May 3, 1946. His activities in Auschwitz were not even part of the trial. He claimed that in Auschwitz he was a doctor for the SS guards only. Well, that was partially true. Initially he was a doctor for the women's hospital and also one of the doctors to select people to die. When he requested to be relieved from that duty, he didn't like that duty. They did transfer him to the hospital for the guards, for the SS guards, but they did not relieve him from his duty to select people to die. He claimed that in Auschwitz he was a doctor for the SS guards only. Well, he signed my father's death certificate, and my father was not an SS man. Who knows how this man justified his actions? What was he thinking, or was he thinking at all? Did he consider himself merely a good soldier by carrying out the atrocities expected by the Nazi government? Where is the fine line between an obedient soldier and a perpetrator of terrible evil deeds? Without the Nazis, Dr. Kidd probably would have been a pretty ordinary human being and might have been a good husband and father and probably a good doctor. One has to ponder how his wife Clara and his son managed to deal with all this after his death. By the way, he voluntarily surrendered to the British. He, in his own mind, hadn't done anything wrong. It gives me no comfort that he was executed on October 8, 1946. So now that the war was over, where am I? Now that the war was over, I found myself on my own at age 17. My mother was in no position to support me and I did not see much of a future in Holland. When my oldest brother Tom offered to help my brother Fred and me to get to the United States, we jumped to that opportunity. When I got to the US with $25 in my pocket, I finished high school in Lenox, Massachusetts, and I then took a job on a dairy in Connecticut. When I got an offer for a position on a dairy in Marin County, I decided to go west. I became a partner in a dairy operation on Tomales Bay, and the partnership lasted for 20 years. It's now known as the Strauss Family Farms. After that, I became a real estate broker, first doing sales and later mainly property management. I have been married twice. I have 6 children from my first marriage, 12 grandkids, 7 grandkids, and 1 on the way. My second wife, Inola, who is knitting back there, and I have been married for over 33 years, and she helped me raise my 2 youngest children. I am often asked why I am not seem angry. The answer is that I was angry at first about what happened to me growing up, but I was also numb. Caring mainly for cows for 20 years allowed me to not have to deal with my anger. Ultimately, with prodding from Inola, I got counseling and realized that anger is a waste of energy and to instead channel my efforts into matters that are productive. Speaking to students like you also has helped me get rid of my anger, because I hope that by sharing my story, I can urge young people to choose a positive path in life, not a destructive one. I'm hopeful for the future, but there's work to be done. And I'm afraid that much of it is up to you guys, because our present world leaders are not dealing with the many long-term problems we face. Some of you will enter the field of politics, and I hope that when you do, that you will deal seriously with what the problems of a growing world population, dwindling resources, global warming, and declining work opportunities, among many others, are. I wish you guys strength, good luck, and a better world.
Are you open to questions?
Yeah.
Did your mother come to the United States with you?
No, she remarried and lived in England. The very last couple of years of her life, she came to the Petaluma, where she passed away. Yeah.
You talked about the two girls who went up to, like, the order of report or reporting, whatever it was, but they left with tennis rackets and sunglasses. Whatever happened to them?
They were among those that died. And like I say, when I hear the pieces of based of Chopin and Liszt and Beethoven that she practiced for hours and hours. I mean, the Hilda Altenburg was an accomplished pianist at a young age. And it's just, the waste is just terrible.
Hans, an interesting part of your story is that your eldest brother elected to return to Germany. Could you tell us a bit about why he chose to do that and if he was glad that he did?
Yeah, I mean, there were several reasons. For one thing, a retired professor in the United States isn't much. In Germany, it's Herr Professor. That was one of the reasons. The other reasons, he retired on a farm of a friend of his and basically went almost nuts. And so that's when he decided to go to Germany, and he did the same sort of thing that I'm doing here right now, educating and in that concentration camp where that he helped liberate, they now have a Werner T. Angress library. So he and his latest woman friend that he had, he met through, who was not Jewish, by the way, but whose father perished in that concentration, whose grandfather perished in that concentration camp. And he spoke to many high schools, and so he did good work in Germany. But like I say, he was a professor over there. And I think his love for Germany never really completely died. Even so, as an interrogator of prisoners of war, I'm glad he kept his humanity. And often he was urged to be rough on the prisoners, and he refused. Yeah.
We recently watched a film where a woman who was a hidden child didn't tell her children about her past until they were like a lot older in their life. Were you open with your children about your experience as a hidden child, or did you wait?
Yeah, I mean, like I say, the first 20 years I didn't really deal with anything. And I didn't hide it. I mean, some of the people that I know absolutely refuse to talk about it. If I'm asked about it, I'm open about it. And some of my kids are more interested than others. Yeah.
One of the things you were talking about is the bystanders at the beginning. Didn't want to bother you too much, but the bystanders.
Right.
Can you speak of maybe your perspective of why some people help and many do not?
I'm not as psychologist or psychiatrist. I don't know why. I mean, those people that did help don't never consider themselves as heroes, even though they are. I mean, they risk their life to save others. And quite frankly, I mean, how many of us would risk our lives? I don't think anybody has ever figured that out, why some people risk their life and others don't. And I think a lot of it has to do with the groups that they associate with. For instance, the family Kui were very active young socialists, and their whole group was involved in resistance. But then there were also a strong Catholic contingent that was involved in resistance. So, and then there were a lot of a lot of people that most people were bystanders, and I think most of us would be bystanders. I might have been, I mean, from where I am today, I wouldn't be. But if I wouldn't have the experience that I have, I might very well have been. Yeah.
So one of our themes for this lecture series, or our theme, is never again. And unfortunately, one of the craziest parts of learning about all of this is that this happened not so long ago. Do you think that with the way that the world is progressing, something like this could happen again?
I'm afraid so. I mean, that's why I'm here, because I'm afraid of it. I mean, I get depressed every morning when I read the newspaper. I mean, why can't people learn to get along? I mean, you know, this lust for power is destroying. I mean, we have enough atomic weapons around to destroy life on Earth. And some idiot is going to use one of these days, and then what? I mean, that's why I say, you know, it's really up to you. I've given up on my generation and on the next generation. If you guys are not going to do it, I don't know what's going to happen in the long run. I mean, I wish I would, but I have to continue to be hopeful that someday humankind will wake up and take a different path. I mean, we have the self-preservation instinct in us. Hopefully it will take over eventually.
Anyone else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.